culture of dignity and love. Rages to rise. We were once rich, now we are in rise. Rages to rise. Now we kneel in the
Hello, once again. Welcome to Reflections. My name is Patrick Tomlinson. I'm your host for the next couple of minutes. Today we have brought back Mr. Walter Waterman, president of the Jamaica Ex-Servicemen's Association, headquartered in Brooklyn. Last time, Mr. Waterman spoke to us and touched upon some very interesting moments in his life. So, by popular demand, we have asked Mr. Waterman to come back and share some of those insights of his time with the West India Regiment, Earl West India Regiment, and his time at the Jamaica Defense Force. Welcome, Mr. Waterman. Thanks for coming back.
Good, thanks for having me.
To be with us. Okay, the last time we spoke, you mentioned some of your activities, your time with the West India Regiment and the Jamaica Defense Force. We spoke about some interesting events in your time serving with the Jamaica Defense Force, and you mentioned some very, very topical issues. Is there anything that you wanted to continue with and to tell our listeners about?
Well, the last time we met, I spoke mainly on my first journey into the regular army.
Mm-hmm.
But this time around, I would like to share some insights of some of the things that I've done while a member of the JDF, such as appointments, promotions, posting, courses, sporting activities, etc.
Okay.
So, having joined the Jamaica Defense Force,
That is in 1961, right? As you say?
1962,
62.
the transition from the West Indian Regiment to the Jamaica Defense Force, when that was formed, I was placed in the company orderly room.
What battalion was that?
That was the 1st Battalion in the Jamaica Defense Force,
Mm-hmm.
and it was Echo Company at the time.
Okay.
I took over the office as chief clerk from 3 retired Bajans that went to various places after the West India Regiment was disbanded.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept that appointment as chief clerk for quite some time until we moved from Hammond Barracks to the now Oak Park Camp,
Okay.
the permanent home of the Jamaica Defense Force.
Okay.
And while I was there, I've done several courses, clerk's courses, starting from B3 to B1. And then after X amount of years as the company clerk, I asked that I be transferred back into the infantry battalion because of one main thing: promotion was passed in me.
Okay.
So I figured that after so many years as a clerk,
Mm-hmm.
I should move on, which the company commander at the time was an English guy named Major Taylor.
Yes.
He
you did
granted
mention
it.
him.
And I moved on to number 9 section, where I became the section commander and been promoted to corporal.
Tell us a little bit about what a company clerk does in your time.
Well, the company clerk, he is responsible for the other guys that working in the office under his command.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep the records of all the soldiers and records on soldiers getting punishment. We have to keep those things on records. And we look after all the correspondence that come to the company office.
Mm-hmm.
And we also deal with sending out correspondence to the battalion and other people that need to get them.
Was it something you enjoyed?
Oh, yes, I enjoyed it, because a lot of my friends asked me why I stay inside this office so long.
Mm-hmm.
What do you find to do from 8 till 4? But there are plenty of things to be done, because there are a lot of records to be kept for each individual soldiers. For instance, annual leave, you have to know as the chief clerk the amount of leave each soldier is entitled to at the end of the year or when he's required to go on leave. We keep the records for promotion dates, courses dates when you go overseas, local or otherwise. So there are a number of things that are being done in that office. Plus, sometimes, which is occasionally, you may have to reply to a letter on behalf of the company commander for his signature.
Okay.
So as the chief clerk, you've got to know what you're doing. If not, you may be in a bit of trouble for writing the wrong things at the wrong time.
Okay.
But overall, in the company office, I enjoyed it until I went back as a section commander. But before I got that promotion to become a corporal, I had to go on several courses in Newcastle.
Tell us a little bit about Newcastle for those who.
Oh, of course,
don't know
Newcastle, 20 miles away from Kingston in the hills of St. Andrew. And it's a very interesting place, the home of the training depot, which is, at this time of the year, it's pretty cold up there right now. And
Has winter-like conditions.
Winter-like conditions. And I've done 2 courses, private to Lance Corporal, and later down the same year I did Lance Corporal to Corporal course, which I did pass. And was promoted to Corporal and I led Delta Company number 9 section for a little while before I was transferred to a headquarter company where I became the General Duty NCO.
Yes. I just wanted to go back a little bit and maybe speak to the history of Newcastle, if you can speak a little bit about that.
Well, Newcastle, they say, is approximately 20 miles from Kingston in the hills of St. Andrew. In fact, it's bordering the Blue Mountain.
Right. So the elevation is pretty high. I mean,
yes, it's
3,000 or 4,000
3,000 odd feet above sea level. And it is said that from Gordontown to Newcastle Parade Square, you have about 365 corners to go around if you're driving a vehicle. But it's a very interesting location to go because from the time you leave Gordontown, it is pure turnings, right, left, right. You can't, it's not one straight road.
I think they said it was formed in like about 1840 something, 1840,
Just
1842.
about that time, yeah.
Yes.
And I was told that it was mainly formed because when the British Army were in Jamaica, they were dying from yellow fever. And when they discovered what was causing the yellow fever, it was the mosquito.
Right.
And they decided to build that camp in Newcastle. And thank God it did the job.
That was designed for.
Yes, alleviated the mosquito situation. Because apparently the British guys was dying so fast that they basically have 2 cemeteries in Newcastle.
Right.
The old cemetery and the new one, but which is abandoned right now.
You remember any of the regiments that came through Newcastle? I know they have a number of plaques and insignias on the
Oh
wall.
yes, quite a number of English battalions was stationed at Newcastle. But what is to my mind, the last one I knew was the Royal Hampshires. Yes, that was the last British regiment that was in Jamaica at the time of independence.
Okay.
The Royal Hampshires.
Oh, okay. So you now got promoted to corporal.
Yes.
And went back to the infantry.
I went to, yes, from the infantry, I was sent to headquarter company as the General Duty NCO. And I was enjoying myself in that new job, a lot of responsibilities. And I decided to ask for inter-transfer in that company. So I approached my company commander and asked him if there's a vacancy.
You remember who that was?
Major Wilson, English Major Wilson. And I requested that if there's a vacancy in the MMG platoon, the recruit platoon, I would like to be transferred. And after a few weeks, a vacancy came up in the MMG platoon, which I was transferred there, and was a commander of 2 vehicles, what we call a section commander. And I did that job for quite a few months. But just as I was settling nicely into that job, I was approached and asked a question that I never wanted to hear, because I lived the clerical field for quite a bit of time, and I was asked, how do I feel to join the orderly room as the orderly room sergeant? And that I was very much surprised on that.
So you're now promoted to sergeant?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. I was given a couple of days to think about it, and I decided that, yes, I will take that challenge, because I am a man love challenges. And I was sent to the orderly room, which I had to be remustered to a tradesman again, B1 clerk, which I did that, passed that course. And I ended up to be the orderly room sergeant. And I spent quite a number of years in the order room as the order room sergeant. Now, it's interesting to note that I was posted again, or was transferred from the order room to SD.
SD is what now?
Supply-
For the benefit of our viewers.
The Jamaica Defense Force Supply Depot. I was sent there to take over the general duties store, because one of the staff sergeants were leaving. He retired. And I went to the SD.
Round about what year was this?
That was approximately 68, 69. And again, when I was settling down, liking the job, because you had to keep your eyes and ears open in that job. Because
Why particularly?
I wouldn't wish to mention that aspect of where you have to keep your ears and eyes open.
Okay.
But it was very interesting. And then, like I said, when it was settled in, I was again transferred to the MT. My God, why me? But, like I said, I love the challenges, and I went to the MT because the headquarters thought it fit to start a Force MT. And this Force MT was headed under Captain Taylor, George Taylor, who subsequently was promoted to Major. And we got there to pool all the transport various groups together, and again, I started to enjoy it. And as we were going along, I got another surprise, and the surprise was I was being transferred to the Coast Guard.
Okay.
And the Coast Guard is the actually Navy wing of the Jamaica Defense Force. So I took that challenge. I went to the Coast Guard.
Where was this, in Port
At
Royal?
Port Royal, which was approximately 26 miles from Kingston. And in fact, I went to the Coast Guard sometime in February 1970, and I spent about 5 years in the Coast Guard. And having enjoyed myself with the Coast Guard again as the chief clerk, I was again called upon to take up a new assignment in the headquarters as clerk's AQ at the headquarters Jamaica Defense Force, which again, I took up that challenge. And I was quite successful in that new job, which that took a lot of energy out of me. It was a very interesting job, because some people ask me, how you do so many things at the same time, but it's what I love and what I did.
So, where were you living? Were you living on the base? Were you living on?
Yes, at the time I was living on the campus. I was living on the campus.
What was that like?
Living on the campus, well, I had no problem to get up early in the morning to try to get to work on time. And It was quite interesting because you could just get up and run any part. In fact, I used to actually live in my office, being living in camp, because normally we will start to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, but when it was in the camp, I got to my office something 7:30.
Right.
And sometimes 11, 12 o'clock, I'm still in the office.
In the night?
Because I can walk from the office straight home.
Okay.
So I had no problem there.
Okay.
And the only thing is when I was transferred to the Coast Guard, that's the only difference. You had to get up a little bit early on to get transport to get to the Coast Guard.
Oh, so you're traveling every day from Kingston to Port Royal?
Yes, yes. But the appointments, I've done quite a number of things.
So how is it different being with the Coast Guards as opposed to being an infantry regiment?
The only difference in the Coast Guard that I had to wear a different uniform.
Yes.
I had to transform from the Army's uniform to the Naval uniform.
Okay.
And it's interesting to note that once I had to go to the headquarters to get something, and I was paid compliments by an officer. He mistook me for an officer on the Coast Guard.
He promoted you.
He promoted me by paying me compliments, and it cost
Did
him,
you return it?
of course, I had to return that salute, and it cost the gentleman a couple of drinks in the sergeant's mess after that for his misbehavior.
Yeah, misbehavior. Okay.
Promoting a chief petty officer to a commissioned officer.
Okay. Okay.
But it was quite interesting job. And then I had to report to a deceased chief of staff. I hope I can take the liberty to call his name, Brigadier Dunstan Robinson, who said to the chief clerk at the time, "Who is this naval man in my office?"
Okay.
The chief clerk at the time was W1 Higgins. Said, "Sir, he is the chief petty officer, Waterman." He said, "We cannot have two chiefs inside the JD. If I'm the chief of staff and I have a chief petty officer, get him out." And that was really a joke.
Okay.
But it was interesting. And then after a time, I was actually posted back to the headquarters. I now had to transform back into the Army's uniform.
Okay.
Get out the naval uniform into the Army's uniform. So I actually wore two different uniforms in the
During your
JDF.
career. Okay. Do you remember any? You said you're very active in sports. You played a number of sports.
Yes, well, at the company level, I never played at battalion level because I don't think I was that good to be at the battalion level. And I think one of the reasons for that was the office work took up too much of your time. You couldn't get, when the other guys are training in the afternoon, you have to be inside the office because things always happen inside that office. But one of the things that I did, I represented the JDF with rugby.
Right.
And
How did you like that?
well, for my size, I enjoyed it. Got a little banging up here and there,
Right.
but no.
What position
better
did you
than-
play?
I played wing forward,
Oh, okay.
or well, not wing forward, scrum half.
I think you
Because
mentioned
of
that
my
last-
size, I couldn't play no other position other than scrum half. Because I remember once we played against a team from Canada, called themselves the Canadian Timbermen, and I was told at the time that the lightest guy on that Canadian Timbermen team was 250 pounds.
Wow.
And could you imagine my size against a 250 pounder? But I took good account of myself.
Right. Right.
And we also had a canoe club in camp, which a lot of soldiers might not know this. And I was a member of that one until it was disbanded. And well, I did a bit of field hockey
Okay.
in the earlier days before I got to be these senior positions.
Okay. So you eventually ended up with what rank No.
Warrant Officer Class 2.
Okay, Warrant Officer Class
Class
2.
2.
For those who are not so military inclined, can you explain what a Warrant Officer Class 2 does and what's the meaning of that appointment or rank?
Well, let me try to make it simple because the Warrant Officer Class 2 is a rank.
It's a rank.
Now, some people confuses the rank with the appointment.
What's the difference?
The difference is a company sergeant major is a Warrant Officer Class 2. A chief clerk of a battalion may be a Warrant Officer Class 2.
Okay.
You have some people who work in certain stores, the SD. You find quite a number of Warrant Officer Class 2s, but the appointments are different. And a lot of people, even soldiers get mixed up with the ranks in the appointment. But Warrant Officer Class 2 and Warrant Officer Class 1, that is the rank. In fact, when you become a Warrant Officer Class 2, that rank is gazetted in the Jamaica Gazette.
Okay.
So that's the difference. And I only hope my viewers who's listening to me, especially warrant officers that's watching this one, wouldn't be mad with me. But the warrant officers that, like myself, who were tradesmen, got a little bit more pay, more than the people that are non-tradesmen.
Okay. What do you mean by tradesmen?
Well, tradesmen, the infantry is what classifies non-tradesmen.
Okay.
But you had people like the clerks, company clerks, peer clerks, medical orderlies, people that work in the air wing aircraft, in the aircraft section, both marine engineers, people that plays in the band, they are all tradesmen.
Oh, okay.
Medical orderlies are all tradesmen.
Okay. And I know from our discussion you love music also. You're a very musically inclined person.
Yes,
How did you develop that?
Well, from a small boy in Barbados, I sang with my church choir. And then I joined the Boys Brigade Band in Barbados because at one stage I want to join the police force merely to get into the band. But I tried the police force first, but because of my height, couldn't make it.
Yes. But how come the police didn't take you, but the army did?
Well, I'll tell you what, the army was at the time still sticking to that 5 feet, 7.5 inches. Anything above, below 5'7", they're not taking you.
Okay.
So I used a little bit of tactics to join the army.
Okay. A little bit of creativity.
Yes, a little bit of creativity, because if my memory serves me right, I don't think the army have my correct measurement because I didn't go on the tape.
Okay.
Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be in the army.
Yes, and he probably wouldn't be here today.
Yes, what he did, instead of stepping on that tape, I went around the tape.
Okay.
I stood at the back and looked up in the air, the thing. But that was fun in those days, and
Okay.
I didn't regret it. I didn't regret it at all.
Anything else you'd like to mention to us as the time is coming up on us?
Well, being as a member of the GDF and going back into the clerical field, I have done so many various jobs in the GDF that there's too numerous to mention. At one stage, I was the officer in charge of the Jamaica Defense Force Youth Club, which was mainly civilians and soldiers mixed up, and they were for younger folks, trying to keep them out of harm's way. Plus, when I went to the headquarters, in addition to Clerk's ARQ, I was the secretary for 2 council meetings in the JDF. One with the council and one in non-industrial. One was unionized members, and the other one was not unionized members. And that was a hectic job to do because you have meetings every 2 weeks for these different meetings. But overall, oh man, there were so many things. I also sang on the Garrison Church Choir as well.
You did? Okay.
Yes.
How was that? And for how long?
Well, in fact, the Garrison Church was all white at the time we got there. And when the JDF took it over, I was one of the first men to join the choir.
Okay.
And
What
in fact, I serve at the altar as well.
you did?
Yes.
What did you sing? What?
I'm not really,
Not bass?
I sing tenor.
Tenor. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not really a soloist.
Oh.
I'm with the group singing. But, you know, it was fun to be there.
And you also told me that during your tenure, you also trained officers in.
No,
not trained officers.
Basically, I had the honor and privilege to lecture officers at Newcastle.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
that was one single occasion. And I remember that day as well, that Thursday, beautiful. I really enjoyed speaking to people that I had to salute and pay compliments.
Oh, they must have
And,
enjoyed it too.
Well, they did, because I was expecting that what I was supposed to tell them, they were supposed to know, but interesting to know, most of them didn't even know half of the
Okay.
thing that they thought I didn't know.
Okay. So you made a very interesting contribution.
That is one of my highlights that I really enjoyed, speaking to these senior guys. And after that, day's activities with these officers, I was approached several times by several of these officers for bits and information on other subjects that wasn't, you know, mentioned at Newcastle. And I think that was a feather in my cap.
I'm sure it was.
And also, one of the things that I have as a feather in my cap, I was the first set of ladies that were recruited into the army as soldiers. I was on that recruiting team.
Okay.
Set the tests, correct them, and in fact, I spent with the first 3 intakes at Newcastle with them as well,
Okay.
teaching them the clerical course.
Very good. Well, we're wrapping up, Mr. Waterman. And we thank you once again for coming and sharing some interesting insights of your time with not only West Indian Regiment, but the Jamaica Defense Force. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Hope to be back again.
Yes, thank you.
Good.